I never imagined that my life, so seemingly steady and full of love, could shatter with just one truth. My name is Sophie. I'm 31, and I've been with Ethan, 32, for almost 6 years. We met in the most mundane yet serendipitous way at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Denver. He was charming, quiet, but with a spark in his eye that made you want to know more. I fell for him faster than I'd like to admit. Within a year, we were living together. By year 2, we had our first child, a beautiful boy named Leo, and not long after came our daughter, June. Life was loud, chaotic, filled with diapers and midnight feedings, but also love. We got engaged 3 years ago. Nothing flashy, just him. A quiet moment, a shaky voice, and a ring that wasn't even in a box. I said yes before he could even finish asking. For the longest time, I believed our relationship was built on trust, loyalty, and honesty. Ethan was never the overly romantic type, but he was consistent. He was there. And in a world where people ghost each other mid-conversation, I found that comforting, safe. I truly believed he was my forever. So when I got the diagnosis in early 2023, HSV2, my entire body froze. I remember sitting on the exam table, the doctor's voice sounding muffled as if she were speaking through water. I had gone in thinking it was some irritation, maybe a yeast infection or razor burn. But herpes, how? My first instinct wasn't anger. It was shame. I cried for hours in my car, unable to drive. I felt dirty, broken, like somehow I had failed. I kept thinking about our kids. Would I accidentally hurt them? How would Ethan react? I told him that night. I couldn't even look him in the eye when I said it. My voice shook. I tested positive for HSV2, I whispered. He didn't even blink. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me and said, "It's okay. We'll figure this out. Maybe I had it and didn't know. Maybe we both did." He kissed my forehead and told me I was still the most beautiful woman he had ever known. I cried into his chest, apologizing over and over. He said it wasn't my fault, that these things happen, that we were stronger than a virus. I believed him. Looking back now, I feel sick at how naive I was. A few nights ago, everything unraveled. We had just put the kids to bed. I was folding laundry when I saw it. A lesion, small, unmistakable, and on him, my heart dropped. I asked gently, "Did you notice this?" He looked down, then looked away. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Have you had this before?" I asked. Silence. My stomach tightened. "Ethan, have you had this before?" My voice was sharper now. Still, nothing. "Ethan, answer me. Now." He sat down slowly on the edge of the bed and wouldn't meet my eyes. After what felt like an eternity, he whispered, "Yeah, before we met." I couldn't breathe. I remember staring at him, hoping I had heard wrong. "What do you mean?" "Before. I was diagnosed in college," he said, barely audible. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared you'd leave." My mind went blank. All the years we spent together, the nights we made love, the 2 babies we brought into the world, all under a lie. "You knew," I said, more to myself than to him. "You knew the whole time." He didn't defend himself, didn't cry, didn't apologize. I stood up, the laundry falling to the floor. "You let me think I gave this to you." Still silence. "You let me cry, apologize, hate myself, because you were too scared to tell me." I didn't sleep that night, or the next. My thoughts were spinning out of control. I kept looking at our wedding board, pinned with plans and colors and venue photos, the little notes I had written about my dress, the playlist we had been curating for years. And I kept thinking, who is this man I was about to marry? I kept replaying everything in my head, searching for signs, red flags, clues I had missed, because surely someone who could hide something that huge must have slipped up at some point. Right. But Ethan was careful. Too careful. I remember a few years ago, when I first suggested we go get tested together, not because I was suspicious, but because I was newly postpartum and thought it was just smart. I had mentioned it casually while we were making breakfast. He brushed it off quickly. "We're monogamous," he had said with a grin. "What's the point?" Back then, I laughed and let it go. Now, that same moment felt sinister, like a man deflecting the one thing that could unravel everything. I started to question everything. How many other things had he hidden from me? Was this the only secret? Or just the one that finally caught up to him? The betrayal wasn't just about the virus. It was about the years he let me believe I was safe. The moments he watched me cry. The way he let me carry the guilt for something he knew wasn't my fault. He let me think I broke something. And I hate how much that still stings. The next morning, I packed the kids up and drove them to my sister's house. I needed space. Ethan didn't stop me. He just stood at the door, watching as I buckled Leo and June into their seats. I didn't look back. I sat on my sister's couch for hours, watching my kids play like nothing had changed. And I envied them. I envied their innocence, their blind trust, their ability to live in the moment without analyzing every word, every silence. My sister knew something was wrong, of course, but I didn't tell her. Not yet. How do you even begin to say that the father of your children knowingly infected you and lied about it for 6 years? The truth felt too ugly to say out loud. That night, Ethan sent me a long text. No apologies, just explanations. He said he was diagnosed when he was 21, that he had only had one outbreak and hadn't had symptoms since, that his doctor told him some people live without ever passing it on, especially if they're careful. But I wasn't careful enough. He wrote, and I'm sorry. Sorry. That one word did nothing for me. I stared at my phone, thinking of all the times I had trusted him with my body, with my heart, with our future. And now I was left wondering, what kind of man makes that choice? What kind of man puts his own comfort above his partner's right to know? When we first started dating, I remember telling him about a childhood trauma, something I had never told anyone. He held me while I cried, said he was honored I trusted him with something so painful. But he couldn't trust me with the truth about himself. That wasn't just cowardice, that was control. I spent that night journaling, something I hadn't done in years. The page was messy, full of crossed-out words, curse words, half-sentences. I wasn't even trying to make sense. I just needed it out of me. Do I stay with a man who betrayed me? I wrote, is keeping my family together more important than my self-respect? Would I forgive him if this had happened to my sister instead of me? That last question stuck with me, because I knew the answer. I would tell her to run, and yet, I wasn't running. I didn't even know what I wanted. One part of me still saw him as the father of my children. The man who made Sunday pancakes and did late-night bottle duty without complaint. The other part of me saw a stranger, a liar, a man who risked my health and let me carry that guilt for months. And I hated that both could be true at once. Later that week, Ethan asked to meet. No kids, just us. I agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop near our house. It was strange seeing him across the table like that, like we were two people on a first date, unsure of how to start. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping either. Sophie, he began, voice low. I know there's nothing I can say that'll make this right. You're right, I said flatly. He nodded slowly. But I want to try. I want to be honest. For real this time. I waited. He told me everything. How ashamed he'd been when he was diagnosed. How his last girlfriend had dumped him because of it. How he promised himself he'd never let it define him. But it did, I said. You just didn't tell me. You defined me instead. He winced at that. And for the first time, I saw something crack in him. Maybe guilt, maybe fear of losing everything. I was scared. He whispered, you were everything I ever wanted. Sophie, I didn't want to lose you before I even had you. You took away my choice, I said quietly. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I had cried enough. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that stretches endlessly, pressing down on your chest like a weight you didn't know you were carrying. I stared at the chipped rim of my coffee cup, tracing it with my thumb, trying to ground myself. I didn't mean to hurt you, Ethan said finally, breaking the silence. I really didn't. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I saw the boy in the man, the fear, the guilt, the regret. And maybe years ago, that would have been enough. Maybe if this was something smaller, something fixable, I could have leaned in, held his hand, whispered, "We'll get through this." But this wasn't small. This was trust, rotting from the inside. And he let it happen. "You didn't mean to hurt me," I echoed. "But you did. And you did it every single day. You chose not to tell me." He flinched. "I know. No. Ethan," I said, my voice low, trembling. "You don't know. You don't know what it's like to sit in a doctor's office and be told something that changes the way you see your body, your past, your future. You don't know what it's like to think I was the one who brought it into our relationship." I carried that guilt for months. I sobbed in the shower, wondering if I was now broken, if you'd still love me. And all the while, you already knew. His eyes were glassy now. He looked down at his hands, then back up. "I hated myself every day." "Good," I said, "because I do too." The words came out before I could stop them. I didn't even know who I was mad at anymore. Him, myself, the universe. All I knew was that the man sitting across from me was not the man I thought I had built a life with. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked again, softer this time, almost begging for something that would make sense. He took a deep breath. "At first, I thought I'd wait until the relationship got serious, but then it did. And I thought, okay, maybe after we move in. But then we got pregnant with Leo, and I felt like I missed my chance. Every time I thought about telling you, I panicked. I told myself I was protecting you, that it didn't matter because we were safe. I convinced myself that if you never found out, you'd never get hurt. And when I did get hurt, I asked, tears finally slipping down my cheeks, what then?" He had no answer, just silence. That night, I didn't go back home. I went to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, needing space but not ready to explain anything to the kids. I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, asking myself the same question over and over again. Can I marry a man who would do this to me? I thought about our wedding plans, the guest list, my dress, still hanging untouched in the closet, the vows I had started writing months ago, filled with words like honesty, respect, forever, words that now felt like a cruel joke. And still, I missed him. God? I hated that I missed him. I missed our morning routines. The quiet laugh he had when June did something silly. The way he absent-mindedly held my hand while watching TV. I missed the comfort of knowing someone's rhythm, of feeling known in return. But I couldn't unknow what I now knew. The next day, I met with a therapist. I didn't even hesitate. I needed someone objective. Someone who wouldn't try to sugarcoat this or tell me everyone makes mistakes. I wanted clarity, or at least, the beginning of it. She listened patiently as I told her everything. I didn't cry. I had cried enough. When I finished, she asked me one question. "Do you trust him now?" I sat in silence. Trust. Such a simple word. Such a complex feeling. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe we could rebuild. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face when he confessed. The way he couldn't look at me. The way he had let me carry a burden that was never mine. "I don't know," I whispered. And that was the truth. I didn't know if I could trust him again. I didn't know if our love could survive this. I didn't know if my children would be better off in a home where their parents stayed together, or one where their mother chose herself. But I knew I couldn't rush it. I owed it to myself to move slowly, thoughtfully. Later that week, I returned home. Not for him, for the kids. I slept in the guest room. Ethan gave me space. Tried not to push. We had quiet dinners and polite conversations about school drop-offs and grocery runs. We were like roommates with a shared grief. One night, after the kids were asleep, he knocked on my door. "I know you're still figuring things out," he said, "but I want to be transparent now, about everything." He handed me a folder. His full medical history, test results, letters from his doctor, even emails he'd written but never sent me over the years. It was overwhelming. "I can't change the past," he said, "but I'll give you every piece of truth I have, if it helps you decide." Then he left, and I sat there, holding his truth in my hands, more terrified than I'd ever been. The folder sat on my nightstand for 3 days. I couldn't bring myself to open it. Every time I reached for it, my hand would hesitate in the air, fingers trembling, like it was some kind of Pandora's box. Maybe I was afraid of what I'd find, or worse, what I wouldn't. What if there was nothing in there that made this feel okay? What if all it did was confirm that the man I loved had never really been who I thought he was? But on the third night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up, turned on the dim bedside lamp, and opened it. Inside was everything he promised. The paperwork from his initial diagnosis, the prescriptions he had filled over the years, mostly unused. A few handwritten journal entries, dated and raw, where he talked about wanting to tell me but not knowing how. One entry from the year Leo was born read, "She deserves to know. I know she does. But what if she leaves? What if this ruins everything?" And another, dated just a few months before I found out. "I think I've convinced myself that she'll never find out. That's the lie I tell myself so I can sleep." I read every page, slowly, twice, and when I was done, I cried. Not the sobbing kind of cry I had done in the shower or the therapist's office. This was different. A quiet, steady grief, not just for what he did, but for what we lost. For the illusion of safety, for the version of our love that could have been, had he told me from the start. In the days that followed, I functioned like a ghost, took the kids to school, answered work emails, cooked dinner, but I was emotionally hollowed out. The kids, thankfully, were too young to understand the shift. They thought mommy was just tired. I let them believe that. One evening, my best friend Naomi came over. She's the one person I've trusted with everything besides my therapist. She sat on my couch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, and waited while I told her the whole story. She didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She just listened. When I finished, she said, "Do you still love him?" I looked down at my lap. "Yes," I whispered, "but I don't know if that's enough anymore." Naomi reached over, took my hand, and said something I'll never forget. "Love is a beautiful reason to try, but it's not always a good reason to stay." That night, those words echoed in my head over and over. Love was the reason I hadn't left. It was why I was still sleeping in the guest room instead of an apartment across town. But trust, respect, safety, those were the reasons I should stay, and they were all broken. Ethan was trying. I'll give him that. He started seeing a therapist. He printed out parenting articles. He cooked dinner 3 nights in a row. He was careful with his words, never pushing, never demanding forgiveness. But part of me wondered, was he doing all this because he truly regretted it, or because he was afraid of losing the life we built? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply embedded this betrayal was. It wasn't a one-time mistake. It was years of silence, years of choice. Every day he woke up next to me, knowing what he was hiding. And that wasn't love. That was fear, dressed up as protection. A week after Naomi's visit, I sat down with Ethan in the kitchen. The kids were at school. The house was quiet. "I need to know something," I said. He looked up. "Anything. If the roles were reversed? If I had been the one to know and not tell you, to let you believe you gave it to me, would you have stayed?" His face changed, slowly. His lips parted slightly, his brow furrowed, and I could see the truth forming in his throat before it even reached his mouth. I don't know," he admitted. "Exactly," I said. "You don't know, because it's not a small thing. And now I'm the one who has to carry the consequences for something I didn't even choose." He nodded, slowly. "I get that." "No, Ethan," I said, my voice firmer now. "You can't get it, because this isn't about herpes. It's about trust. It's about knowing that the person I share a bed with would rather risk my health than his own discomfort." He looked down, ashamed. But I didn't stop. "I'm not saying I'm done," I added. "But if we're going to fix this, really fix this, it's going to take more than therapy sessions and folded laundry. I need to believe you would never lie to me again. About anything. And right now, I don't." He nodded. "Then I'll earn that belief, however long it takes." Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me still loved him. But the rest of me knew. Something fundamental had shifted. The version of our relationship I had believed in was gone. And now we were standing in its ruins, deciding whether to rebuild or walk away. The days that followed were a strange kind of quiet, not peaceful, but cautious, like we were living in a house made of glass. Afraid any sudden movement might shatter what was left, Ethan kept his promise. He started therapy regularly, even showed me his appointment summaries without me asking. He suggested we go to couples counseling. He cleaned up around the house more, made Leo's lunch, braided June's hair badly. But still, he was trying to earn something back that words couldn't touch. And I was trying to stay open, but it wasn't easy. I remember one morning waking up and hearing him humming in the kitchen. It was the same tune he always hummed when making pancakes. I stood at the top of the stairs, frozen. That sound used to make me smile. Now, it made me ache, because beneath the familiarity, there was a crack I couldn't ignore. It reminded me that even the sweetest memories were built during a lie. We went to our first therapy session on a Tuesday. The therapist, a kind-looking woman in her 40s, asked us what we wanted from the process. Ethan said, "I want to fix what I broke." I said, "I want to understand if this can even be fixed." She nodded, like she'd heard it all before. We talked about the diagnosis, the betrayal, the way Ethan let me carry the shame. I didn't hold back. I told her everything I had been too afraid to say aloud, to him or anyone. I felt like trash, I said at one point, like something he used up and left contaminated. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He reached for my hand, but I didn't take it. Not yet. The therapist gave us exercises, weekly check-ins, safe words for when things got overwhelming, journaling prompts. Some nights, we sat in the living room and answered her questions out loud. Things like, "What's one thing you need to hear from me today?" Or, "What's one fear you're carrying right now?" Ethan answered honestly. I could tell he was scared. Scared I'd wake up one day and decide I couldn't do it anymore. The truth is, I was scared of that too. One night, about a month into therapy, I had a nightmare. In it, I was back in that doctor's office. Except this time, Ethan was standing beside the doctor, smiling, saying, "I told you not to look." I woke up drenched in sweat, gasping. Ethan stirred. "Sophie, what's wrong?" I didn't answer. I just walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. That was when I realized healing wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about identity, about becoming someone who could live with this truth and still love herself. I wasn't there yet. The next morning, I told Ethan I needed space, not separation. Just physical space to think. He nodded, though I could see the panic flash in his eyes. I booked a small cabin in the mountains for the weekend. Just me, no phone, no laptop, just silence, trees, and a journal. That first night alone, I sat by the fireplace and tried to write. But instead of journaling about my pain, I ended up writing a letter to myself. "Dear Sophie, you didn't do anything wrong. You loved someone deeply. You believed him. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. What happened to you wasn't your fault, but what happens next, that's your choice. Whatever you choose, whether you stay or walk away, choose it because it honors your truth, not because you're scared, not because you feel guilty, but because you know what you deserve." I cried reading it back, but for the first time in weeks. The tears didn't feel like drowning. They felt like release. When I got home, Ethan was in the backyard with the kids, building a blanket fort. He looked up when he saw me, didn't rush over, didn't say anything, just smiled. It was a small smile, but it felt real. That night, I sat him down and said, "I'm still not sure where this ends, but I'm willing to keep walking if you are." "I am," he said, without hesitation. We agreed to pause the wedding, not cancel it, just pause. We returned the venue deposit, put the dress in storage, and told our families we needed time. It was hard. Everyone had questions. My mom was devastated. Ethan's parents were confused. But I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone a timeline for my healing. In the months that followed, we slowly rebuilt, brick by brick. Some days, we made progress. Others, we backslid. But there was honesty now. Brutal, sometimes awkward, but honest. One night, while folding laundry, Ethan said, "I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm grateful you're giving me one anyway." I looked at him, then at the laundry in my hands, and said, "Thanks for joining me today here on Love on Reddit." If today's story resonated with you, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more real, heartfelt stories every week. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences or feelings in the comments below. Remember, love isn't always perfect, but every story matters. See you soon, and take care of your heart.